Okay, this is part 2 of the report on the Little Round Top scenario, and it continues from the 1600 to 1700 turn. This turn commences at 1700. As I noted there's a lot happening on a tactical level. Here's a quick glimpse of the situation at the end of that first hour at about 1700. As you can see, 2 regiments of Ward's Brigade plus an independent unit in the far south block the Confederate advance on Little Round Top. Vincent's 311, the blue and orange units with the green dot, have rushed along the Taneytown Road in an attempt to secure the heights before the Rebs can get up there. Now, this 1700 to 1800 turn begins disastrously for the Confederates. They receive an efficiency marker of 1, meaning that all brigades will begin with a basis of 1 activation for the entire hour. In contrast, the Union forces receive an efficiency marker of 4. Now, once again, the focus needs to be on Hood's division, as his lead regiments are a few hundred yards from the Little Round Top. So Longstreet uses his efficiency rating to increase Hood's activations by 1. Now, Hood also has an activation rating of +1, so this brings his activations up to 3, which isn't too bad. However, McLaws' division in the north will have to make do for the entire hour with their 1 activation. On the plus side, the Confederates hold on to the initiative, so Hood is given the first activation. All other activation markers are then thrown into the cup. Now, with his initiative, Hood orders his brigades to charge at the Little Round Top. This is now a race for the heights. Laws and Benning lead the charge brilliantly, surpassing Hood's expectations by forcing 3 of Ward's regiments to rout. This opens up quite a large, roughly 600-yard gap in the Union lines, and as you can see here, a pretty clear path ahead to the Little Round Top. At the end of this activation, the lead regiments of Law's Brigade are just 250 yards from the heights of Little Round Top. To the north, dust rising into the air signals to Hood that more Union reinforcements are flooding into the area. Crawford, Ayres bring on their divisions, and they try to rush to the scene of the fighting. Congestion on the roads forces many of these regiments off to the side, where they race their compatriots to the front. Bernay's activation follows, and Ward tries to make some sense of the situation here. In the north, he links up with de Tourbriand's brigade, the 313, whilst in the south, the isolated 33rd Pennsylvania fall back in a brave attempt to slow down the Confederate advance. Now, Barnes's activation follows, and this includes Vincent's brigade. Now, the Union breathe a sigh of relief as Vincent's men quickly begin to climb the eastern or the right side of Little Round Top. However, tension soon builds again as these Union men are slowed by the rough terrain. They cannot quite reach the heights in this activation. They can't secure the 2 critical VP locations, and instead they finish their activation only halfway up the hill, leaving the heights still open and unoccupied. Barnes's activation is followed by the arrival of more reinforcements under Caldwell. Then the Confederate artillery takes its single activation to move close to the front. Now, in an embarrassing blunder here, Eshelman's Confederate artillery have become lost behind the field of battle. They've taken wrong turns and have wandered into difficult woods. They haven't even fired a shot yet. And at their current rate of advance, they're unlikely to do so before the day's out. So that's a bit of a waste. Then Confederate hearts rise as Hood receives the next activation. Anderson's men advance along the northern side of Big Round Top, and they pin Ward's isolated defenders in place. And then Law's brigade charges up the hill. Now, these men have just crossed over 1,000 yards of rough terrain, and they charge up Little Round Top like their lives depended on it. But this momentum can only take them so far. They finish their activation 1 hex short of the top of the hill. Control of the heights will certainly come down to who will get the next AM, the next activation marker, whether it's Hood or Barnes. Benning advances alongside Law's brigade on the left, whilst Robertson's men take up a position on Hewitt's Ridge to protect the northern flank there and really threaten Bernay's position. Now, as quick as the Confederate hopes rise, they sink as Barnes receives the next activation. Vincent's men reach the northern summit of Little Round Top, which is one of the two VP locations. But being under advance orders, they're not allowed to advance adjacent to Confederate positions, and they must hold. In the north, Tilton's men protect Vincent's flank. Now, a series of Union reinforcement AMs follow, and these begin to line up in droves behind Little Round Top. Now, from his vantage point, Hood can only see clouds of dust rising behind the hills ahead, but from our perspective here, it's an ominous sight seeing so many Union reinforcements preparing to enter the fight, unseen by their opponents on the other side of the hill. This is really only the start of that Union build-up. More are on their way along the crowded roads to the north. So as regiments crowd into position behind Little Round Top, Barnes's men finally get a chance to reach the top. Vincent changes his men's orders to attack. The word passes around, his men charge, and they finally secure both heights of Little Round Top. In the ensuing shock combat, they manage to force Lawes's men back down the hill and away from the heights. And McLaws finally receives his activation in the north, and he uses this to tentatively approach the Union positions. Now, Confederate attempts to threaten the defenders with small arms fire is replied to by the booming volley of the Union Napoleon artillery guns, after which McLaws' men decide that discretion here is the better part of valour. More Union reinforcements rush to the front, and before Hood finally receives his last activation of the turn, he can now see Union reinforcements crowding around Little Round Top to both the north and the south, and he knows that more are to come. He must take that hill before Union forces flood the heights, and it must be now. He orders Laws to advance his exhausted, disordered, and heavily weakened brigade. They must advance, charge Little Round Top, and capture that summit. Laws reluctantly accepts this task. His really bedraggled men climb their way up the hill, launch themselves at the Union defenders, and for the most part are soundly defeated. Against the steep slopes of the Little Round Top, Laws' men fall back in dismay. But in the more favourable terrain immediately to the north, they, with Benning's brigades' support, succeed in forcing Tilton's men back. Now, this may not seem like much, but it does expose the flanks of that Union position on Little Round Top. With the situation developing in the south, this may mean that in the near future, Hood's division may be able to slowly squeeze the tip of that Union position on the heights of Little Round Top and force them out. The only question is whether his men can sustain these constant losses. One brigade has already collapsed and several more are very close to it. Benning's brigade has seen action, but they are still at full strength, while in the south, Anderson's brigade, whilst disordered, is also still at full strength, and they have the potential for a push. Now, there are still 2 more hours left before dusk, and basically the end of this scenario. Union troops currently hold the heights, but if I've learned anything, it is that a concentrated and a determined assault can very quickly dislodge a defender. It may be the best for the Rebs to get Benning and Anderson to slip around the sides and cut in on the heights from there, instead of attempting another charge straight up the steep slopes again. In any case, Lawes' men are simply not up for another frontal assault. They can't bear the losses. Henry's artillery of Hood's division is also close to getting into position, and pretty soon they'll be able to direct some heavy firepower against the positions on Little Round Top. And here is that final view of the situation at the end of the 1700 to 1800 turn.